The world is rightly disgusted at Putin's bloody invasion of Ukraine, and it is right and proper that we should be as generous as possible in our solidarity with the Ukrainian people fleeing Putin's bloody war. And I just want to commend groups like the Red Cross and the many individuals who have offered accommodation, and indeed many of whom have gone out to offer transport and other assistance in Ukraine to help Ukrainian people exit this disastrous war instigated by Putin. We have a huge task in terms of accommodating the people that are coming in, but frankly, this should be the moment when we take the sort of radical measures that we should have taken long ago to address the housing emergency in this country. And you see, one of the things we learned during COVID, and we may learn it again, is when the government actually wants to have an emergency response, it's capable of doing so. Now, it is absolutely right that we should have an emergency response to the disaster in Ukraine, but as somebody put it to me in the St Helens Court complex, who've been threatened with eviction by a vulture fund, and where sitting alongside the place they're being evicted from, there have been for the last 2 years 15 empty apartments that the vulture fund has just sat on, which should have been used to house people. They said, maybe finally the government will build some houses for us, right? So in other words, they weren't in any way hostile to Ukrainians coming in. They absolutely recognised the need to be generous, but they simultaneously ask, does this mean now we actually could have the wherewithal to make homelessness a thing of the past, and to take the sort of radical measures to get hold of empty properties being sat on by speculators and land hoarders and so on to house everybody? We should have done it long before, and this should be the moment when we do it now. The other thing I just want to comment on as well is, if we are rightly opening the door and our hearts, if you like, to people fleeing from Ukraine, it is also revealed essentially a double standard in terms of providing refuge to people fleeing war. We learn with Ukraine, why do people flee their homes? Because of war. And immediately we recognise they don't want to leave home, but they need assistance. Was that any less true in Afghanistan? Except it was a US-led war. Maybe that's why we had a different attitude. Was that any less true in Syria, which was a Russian-led war? But we were different in terms of our treatment of Syrians. Do we show the same generosity for people fleeing Somalia that the US just bombed in the last few weeks? Different standard. And those double standards will come back to haunt us. And those double standards are apparent in our different responses to the politics of Putin's imperialist invasion. It is an imperialist invasion, but so was the US-UK-led war on Iraq. What is the support for Israel, who Amnesty are now condemning rightly as guilty of crimes against humanity against the Palestinian people? We don't impose the same sanctions on them, we don't criticise them in the same way, and we certainly don't offer the same level of solidarity to the Palestinian people. So is this going to be the moment when double standards are abandoned and we oppose all warmongering in the same way, and we show the solidarity to all people fleeing war, regardless of their colour or creed?